There's a lot to unpack here, so bear with me. Also, one of my favorite things to talk about. What that favorite thing to talk about, I'm sure as the video says, is paneling. So let's move into it. So panelings are what tells you the story in sequential order. Sometimes it helps to see it as a movie or TV show. So consider, like, if you were going to make yours into a cartoon, what would that look like in your head? So play it out in your head. It's the most important part of the scene to convey. So when you are making and doing your panelings, what is the hierarchy of importance to you in your story? And you're going to convey it visually. Consider the pace of your comic and guide the reader through the story. Again, we can't read your mind. You need to guide us. We're your audience, and we want to we want to see and read your story, but we need your help. Panels are actually older than comic books. I'm sure a lot of you know about that. Hieroglyphs, the Greeks and Roman sculptures and friezes. Example, the Trajan's Column. Here's a picture of the Trajan's Column. It's a story of Rome over the Dacian people. So if you want to look more into that, I highly suggest it. A lot of these, especially the hieroglyphs and stories and things like that, are absolutely fascinating. So with that, let's move to Western and Eastern comics. So I'm sure some of you, most of you, if not all of you, have read like a Marvel superhero comic, or one of those American form thin comics, or you've read manga, which I'm sure a lot of you heard about, and there's also Korean and Chinese form and things like that. So we have the Western and Eastern comics, and they're actually read differently, and let's go into that. A lot of the reason why they are like this is because of the writing system. So the writing system, let's take for instance Japanese. You read the writing syllabary, which is different from the alphabetical. Here's an example. It's written from right to left. So the Japanese syllabary is written from right to left. So as you look at the manga, here's an example of the manga, and this is how they read because of their writing structure. So sometimes it can take a minute to get used to, but it's not so bad. And then of course the American comics, as we all know, is written from left to right. So therefore, as we read, we will also read along the same lines as left to right. Size and being limited by the page. It's the hierarchy of importance for the reader. Here is a splash page or a full panel. It's great for establishing a shot or wrapping up a scene. The reader needs to digest what they've just read. So the splash page can be really good for that, or especially for action scenes and whatnot. And then there's also what we're very used to is the box panel, which is focusing in on a certain aesthetic that you are going for as the writer and illustrator. The main value comes in pacing the story. It deals with how much art the audience eye has to digest before moving on to the next image. So if you have something that is very detailed and has a lot that the audience needs to look at, I would suggest considering making the panel bigger so that the viewer can see that. Whereas something is a little bit more simple and it's more about what they say, I would focus on to the character in that panel and then the speech bubble with not as much background, because you don't want to wash out the point of the story as well. So it's just making those personal calls, which can be rather hard at times. Something that I love in comics, both Eastern and Western, is the cinematic fade. It shortens the panel boxes until nothing but black or white. Slanting and canting. We like the straight lines. Slanting something can bring out the unsettling emotion. So say you're doing horror, having those lines instead of being straight slanted can be jarring to the viewer, because we naturally like those kind of straight, more neat fit lines. So by taking what we're accustomed to and what we like and kind of tilting it, also gives us that unsettling feeling as suggested earlier. Also, you can try jagged lines for more of a creepy effect. So again, with like the horror or a suspenseful scene, putting those jagged lines in can really impact what you're trying to get across. It's amazing how important the panels play with the actual art itself. There is limitless combinations and designs you can do, so it's more of your call as the creator but keep in mind some of the kind of rules in which we play in. It's much like art itself. Once you understand, like, for example, illustration and character design, once you understand the concept of anatomy in the body, you can play with that form and do all sorts of different things that gear more towards you. How artists frame their images is just as important as the image itself. There's still so much more. I could probably teach a camp just on paneling alone. So if you have any more questions or you need some suggestions and examples, you know what to do. All right, see you in the next video. Goodbye.